Greetings and welcome. I want to play a game.
Speaker, when this House rises, the government will have deliberately left crucial questions answered. On the $90,000 check, unanswered, on the $90,000 check, and the Prime Minister...
Of course, Mr. Speaker, I agree with the first half of the first rendition of his question, where he said our government has indeed answered these questions. But also what's important to note, Mr. Speaker, is when the House indeed does rise, our government will be very proud of not only the questions we've answered, but the actions we've delivered for Canadians. Just yesterday, we passed Bill S2 to provide Aboriginal women with equal rights to non-Aboriginal women.
How will you measure in quantifiable terms whether the inquiry into the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls is successful?
The Prime Minister's response as to much of the town hall questions was brief and general.
Well over 1,000 missing and murdered sisters, daughters, aunties, grandmas, granddaughters across this country that will never be brought back, no matter how good the inquiry is. All we can do is try and give a space to heal, to learn some very real lessons.
Questions were also asked about the problems plaguing the child welfare system.
There's 12,000 of our children that are in care. That's ridiculous. And it needs to change. And the only way it will change is by listening to what the First Nations people want to do and how to keep our children safe and move toward a system that's going to be responsible and accountable to our families.
And his minister adds that that Canada will not be able to accommodate all Indigenous concerns. What that means is that they have decided to willfully violate their constitutional duties and obligations. Mr. Minister, Mr. Speaker, sounds like a most important relationship, doesn't it? Why doesn't the Prime Minister just say the truth and tell Indigenous peoples that he doesn't give a fuck about their rights?
You're quite comfortable with describing yourself as a feminist. Tell us about that.
Well, first of all, I'm going to keep saying loud and clearly that I am a feminist until
Hear me roar.
Until it is met with a shrug. Why does every time I say I'm a feminist, the Twitterverse explodes and news medias pick it up? It shouldn't be something that creates a reaction. It simply is saying, I believe in the equality of men and women, and I believe that we still have an awful lot of work to do to get there.
I just want to get your reaction. It's hard to read this. To a statement made by the person involved, where she says that the incident referred to in the editorial did occur, as reported. Mr. Trudeau did apologize the next day. I did not pursue the incident at that time and will not be pursuing the incident further. I've had no subsequent contact with Mr. Trudeau before or after he became Prime Minister. And then she says, the debate, if it continues, will continue without my involvement. So could you please give a reaction to that?
Obviously, over the past weeks, since this news resurfaced, I've been reflecting on past things I said. I'm confident that I did not act inappropriately, but I think the essence of this is that people can experience interactions differently, and part of the lesson we need to learn in this time of collective awakening is a level of respect and understanding for the fact that people, in many cases, women, experience interactions in professional contexts, in other contexts, differently than men. I apologized in the moment because I had obviously perceived that she had experienced it in a different way than I acted, or I experienced it. And I think this reflection as we move forward needs to continue in our communities, in our places of power, in our places of work. There is an awakening going on, and we need to take opportunities to continue to reflect on it. This is something that I've been involved in for well over 20 years in my student activism and in the outreach that I've done, and there's always more to do and more to reflect on.
How do you feel, though, about the fact that she's now issued a statement saying she's not going to be involved in any of the further, she's not going to be involved in any stories going forward, and nor does she want to pursue this in any way? How do you feel about that?
As I've said from the very beginning, I would never presume to speak for her or to have a perspective on how she should feel or should act on this. I respect very much her right and her ability to make choices about what is best for her and her family, and I obviously will continue to stand as a defender of understanding and respect for individuals and the experiences they go through.
This situation has basically officially said that she won't make any further statement with this. How do you think people should be handling this at this point? What is this over? Will you continue to answer questions about it? How do you look at it?
I will continue to talk about this as much as people have questions about it. This is really another important example of the kind of reflections we all have to have as a society about our behaviors and about specifically how what can be viewed as fine behavior on behalf of one person might be perceived and experienced very differently from someone else. I think there is an awakening going on right now, and I think it's a good thing, but it also requires all of us to be having difficult conversations, difficult reflections, and model the kind of responsibility and reflections that we have to have moving forward.
You are attending Mr. Hare's Stampede Breakfast tomorrow. Mr. Hare lost his cabinet post essentially in relation to an allegation. For some people, they won't see much difference between what was alleged against him and what is alleged against you. How do you see the difference between those two things?
I think people understand that every situation is different, and we have to reflect and take seriously every situation on a case-by-case basis, and that's exactly what we're endeavoring to do in any range of situations that come forward. Different organizations are struggling with similar challenges, and we all need to really focus on how we can move forward in a way that respects and supports people coming forward and allows for processes and reflections and learning while we move.
The 2015 election will be the last federal election using first past the post. The fact of the matter is, I am not going to do something that is wrong for Canadians just to tick off a box on an electoral platform. That's not the kind of Prime Minister I will be.
Well, two very different sounding Justin Trudeaus there. Was it a broken promise, or worse, was it a lie?
Sophie Gregoire Trudeau and the Prime Minister are a couple that define themselves in part as feminists. But a post on social media by Gregoire Trudeau on the eve of International Women's Day has sparked some controversy. In it, Gregoire Trudeau says, "Let's celebrate the boys and men in our lives who encourage us to be who we truly are," and ask people to take a photo holding hands with the man in their life and share it. That unleashed outrage. One person wrote, "Shameful, really. I think I'll be taking photos with my daughters, female friends, and colleagues instead." Another said, "Are you kidding? I support the men in my life 365 days a year. And frankly, it's time to celebrate the mothers and sisters and daughters who have to fight every day to support and advance women's causes." But today, Gregoire Trudeau...
Up until now, you just sat there as a voyeur watching other people in their videos without care about who that person is. Well, what do voyeurs see when they look into the mirror? Let's find out. Right now, you are being watched. And if you forget for 1 second that you are being watched,